Scott Chadwick, who is the head football coach at Clayton High School now, but was the head football coach at Myers Park High School years ago when Drake Maye was playing quarterback at Myers Park. And now Coach Drake is headed to the Super Bowl with the New England Patriots. I assume you knew when he was in high school he'd one day fill the shoes of Tom Brady as a New England Patriot, right?
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I mean, I will say his success at this level has not surprised me. I really did feel like um, early on when I saw him that he had potential, and then certainly watching him actually play and being part of his seasons in 2018 and 2019. This does not surprise me, the success he's had. Don't know if I could have said I would have seen him being an MVP candidate in his second season, though. That's pretty amazing.
I believe he is the youngest quarterback to get to the Super Bowl, too. I believe I saw that on ESPN this morning. When you hear the name Drake Maye, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you aside from his arm talent as a quarterback?
Oh wow, probably just the kid who just sat on the couch in my office for many times over that 2 to 3 year stretch, and just chatting with him.
Mhm.
I tell people all the time that I've now lost 3 state championship games in my career, and a couple of semifinals, but my biggest disappointment ever in my coaching life was not being able to have Drake's senior year, not being able to coach him because of COVID. And everybody's like, well, of course, you didn't get to coach a generational guy, his senior year. And I'm like, you know what? It really doesn't have anything to do with that. It has more to do with the fact I didn't get to be around him. I didn't get to just spend that time with him. He was so enjoyable to coach because he was one of those kids that you so much enjoy being around. And that's when I think of him, I think of that kid that, just sat in my office and game planned with and just talked about, life in general. And that's what I think of when I think of Drake Maye.
Were you the coach there when came in as a freshman?
So he was at Huff as a freshman.
That's right. That's right.
And then,
So he came in as a sophomore.
Yeah, and I tell the story about, so in 2017 when he was still at Huff, he was a freshman. He was the backup quarterback on the varsity, and we played them in the quarterfinals. And all week leading up to the game, all my coaching buddies in Charlotte kept telling me, "Hey, don't knock the starter out." And I was like, "Well, why?" They're like, "Because the backup, the freshman kid, is better." They're like, "So whatever you do, don't knock the starter out because you don't want to play against this freshman." So I had a little bit of knowledge of him. And when he came and started working with Josh McCown and I at our quarterback training group, I was like, yeah, now I see what these people were talking about.
When he arrived at Myers Park as a sophomore, what was your reaction when he first stepped out on the field? I guess it's probably summer workouts or something, and you saw him throw the ball.
Well, we had worked with him in our quarterback training group starting in January. So, I had the opportunity to work with him there and see him throw there. I think the thing that really stuck out to me was we knew, when he got there, when he transferred there in the summer, we knew that, even though he was a sophomore, that he was probably going to eventually, he was going to be our starter. But he never asked for anything to be given to him. He worked extremely hard all off season, all summer. Was great in all of our 7-on-7s, and never tried to overstep his bounds. And but the moment that we were like, okay, this guy is our starter. He was great from the start. I think in our first game of that season, he threw for almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. From in the very first game. So I think. There was never a point where you wondered if this kid was going to be great.
You yourself have coached a number of good quarterbacks. Charlotte as a city has had some of the best quarterbacks that we've had in North Carolina come through. Maybe the best in Chris Leak when he was in Independence. What what was different, or when did you realize Drake Maye was different from many of the other really good quarterbacks, or even a lot of the elite quarterbacks who never get to the NFL?
I think when you watched, maybe the first few games of his sophomore year, um, there was just something different about him in his playmaking ability. You know, I kind of joke with people all the time, like they talk about his legs and how great of a runner it is. We didn't really let him do that. Like we were very, like just kind of stay in the pocket. But the one thing he did do that we obviously allowed, his pocket mobility and his ability to create time in the pocket was just tremendous. And that was one of the things you saw right away was his the ability to throw the ball from different platforms. Obviously, if he's standing in the pocket, he could catch and throw with the best of them. But just his ability to be able to move off his spot and still be able to, to make great throws. And that was something we worked on. That was probably one of the first things that we worked on with him was, being escaping from the pocket, but also then keeping your eyes downfield and being able to scramble to throw versus scramble to run. And we really emphasized the scramble to throw part. And to see how great he was at that early in that sophomore year, that's when I kind of knew, okay, this kid's got the ability to be special because the defensive pressure is not going to get to him. He has an answer. He has the ability to handle pressure that other people just didn't have the ability to do.
Is there a single play that he made that you think of when you think about the big plays that he made in high school that you recall easily?
The funny thing is, like his junior year in 2019, he only played in the fourth quarter in 2 games. He only played in the fourth quarter of the semifinal game that we lost to Richmond, and I think he played in the fourth quarter of the Butler game. That was it. I mean, we averaged 50.0 points a game that year. So when everybody asked me to pick out a specific play, it wasn't like he had to lead some big 2-minute drive or, do anything special. But I would say that there were 2 big moments in his career that stand out to me. One, his sophomore year, going down to Richmond County in the quarterfinals that year. And, he threw for well over 300 yards and just lit them up. And people didn't do that. You don't go to Richmond County and dominate them the way we did that year. I think, it was something like 34-13 or something. And he was just unbelievable that night. That moment, of him going down there as a sophomore and winning big at a place that people just didn't do that to, and getting us to the semifinals for the first time in, I think 20 years at that time at Myers Park. Then his senior, I want to say it's his senior, but it wasn't his junior year. We played Huff in a non-conference game, and it was a big deal to him, but he didn't let on to everybody during the week. He didn't want to make it about him, didn't want to make, the story about Drake going back to Huff. But at the end of the third quarter, we were up 68-7, and he had thrown 6 touchdowns and ran for another. And you could tell sitting there that night how much it meant to him, even though he wouldn't say it. It meant a lot to him. And it was the only time in the 2 years that he was there when I went to take him out of a game that he said something to me. So I think it was the end of the third quarter. It's like 68-7 at the time. And I'm like, hey, all right, you're done. And he was like, Coach, I wanted to put 70 on these guys. And I was like, come on, man, it's 68-7, and, we had Owen McCown. Owen, who's now been the MVP of 3 bowl games at UTSA. So we had a pretty good guy, behind him. Mm-hmm. I'm like, man, I got to get Owen some work here, man, but just to see that night, he never made it about himself that night, but it really, really meant a lot to him. And again, you don't put 68 points up in 3 quarters against Huff.
I was going to ask about what kind of a competitor he is, but that might answer that question. So I'll just move on and ask, what would Drake's high school teammates describe him as in the locker room when you're not on the field, playing the actual game?
I think he was an overwhelming encourager. He always wanted to pat people on the back, always wanted to tell them what a great job they were doing. Always just wanted to let people know how much he appreciated them. Almost to the point that I remember, but after his junior years, we were getting ready for his senior year. Some of the things we were trying to develop him as a leader, and I don't really know how to say this other than he needed to be a little tougher on people, because he was such an overwhelming encourager and so great at, appreciating people, that one of the things I was working with him in that off season leading up to his senior year was how to maybe hold people a little more accountable, how to be a little bit tougher on people, how to be a little bit more demanding. And that was kind of the next step, in the leadership phase that I was trying to get him to. And, again, of course, we didn't have that, but I think his teammates would talk about what a great teammate he was, because he was always such a guy that picked everybody up and was so appreciative of his teammates, never, ever made it about himself, never tried to get the spotlight. I often tell people there's a, I don't know if you call this a story, but this is kind of who he was. In his junior year, it was like the third or fourth game of the season. My son Cody, was my statistician analyst, handled all my numbers for me. And he came up to me after one of the games. He goes, "I got to tell you something, just in case this gets back to you. I want you to understand what's going on here." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, the first 3 or 4 games of that year at halftime, Drake would always go up to him and take the stat sheet or the book, and he wanted to look at the numbers from the first half." And he said somebody made a comment, "Oh, look at Drake. He's looking at his stats from the first half." So Cody wanted me to know that that's not what Drake was doing. What Drake was doing was he was seeing how many balls each receiver had caught and how many targets each receiver had had. And he would look at it, and whoever had the least, he would come to me and be like, "Hey, I think this play might work," or "I think that," whatever it was that person was the primary receiver for, he would come to me and suggest that. So what he was doing was he wasn't trying to look at his numbers. He was trying to see what he needed to do to make, keep all the receivers in the room happy.
Wonder if he's doing that with Stephon Diggs and Hunter Henry and those guys now.
Exactly. I'm sure he's still doing that. But let me tell you, that year when you got Musa Muhammad, Porter Rooks, Jordan Bly, that was a tough group to manage sometimes.
When did the attention really come to Drake, from the outside, whether that's the college coaches who are calling and all the various media outlets that are out there covering high school sports or recruiting? When did that really pick up?
I would say at the end of his sophomore season, from the time our season ended that year up until spring ball. I would say that was probably the biggest time. I think he was made the Max Prep sophomore All-American team, and obviously the amount of film we had. I kind of noticed it. We were getting ready to play Vance in the semifinals that year, and that was right when the winter recruiting period for colleges started. And I remember it like our Wednesday practice that week, counting, there was like 27 college coaches that came to our practice that week. And now look, we had a lot of dudes. I mean, we had a lot of guys that went on to play, major Division I football, but most of those head coaches that showed up that day were there to hear. They wanted to see this sophomore quarterback that everybody was talking about. So kind of started the end of his sophomore year, but more of the off season, and then our spring practice going into his junior year. Man, that was a who's who of different college coaches that came by, and it was one of those spring balls where there wasn't a practice where there wasn't at least half a dozen schools at every one of our spring practices.
He obviously went to UNC and had a great career there. His dad played quarterback there. His brother, obviously, basketball at UNC. Was there ever a doubt that was where he was going to end up?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, after his sophomore year, he told me to make sure I told anybody that was recruiting him that he wasn't going to Carolina. He did not want to go there. He wanted the program was down at that point. That was kind of the end of the Larry Fedora era. I think Mac was just starting to come in at that point. But he wanted to go to a place that was football first. He didn't want to go to a place that in October they were asking about, basketball season and things like that. And, he spent that whole off season between his sophomore and junior year evaluating things. And eventually his three finalists were Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama. And Ohio State said in his class they were only going to take one, and they ended up getting a commitment from Kyle McCord, and basically said they were only going to take one. And then Clemson in the class ahead of Drake had taken DJ Uiagalelei, however you say his name, and I think Drake felt like it might block him a little bit. Whereas Alabama had not taken anybody in the class in front of Drake and told him if he committed that they wouldn't take anybody in that class. And they still had, Matt. So that would put like 2 or 3 years between him and Mac Jones. So that's why he committed to Alabama. Well, Mac came in, kind of changed, the program there the fall of Drake's junior year. And the big thing that North Carolina had going for them was actually Luke Maye, because Luke Maye was still playing basketball at North Carolina. So every time Drake would go to North Carolina to watch Luke play, Phil Longo and a couple of the other coaches somehow found their way to the basketball game. And
Smart.
It's a free opportunity. He's on their campus. It's a free recruiting opportunity. And they continued to recruit him. And eventually and I think his own family probably recruited him a little bit. And then the other thing, the ironic part in all of this is, in the meantime, while all that's going on, Alabama flips Bryce Young from USC. So now, when they hadn't had a quarterback in the class in front of Drake, now they did. So when it came time that he flipped from Alabama to North Carolina, I'll say this: I give Alabama credit. They didn't really, get that upset with him, because in their minds, they knew they had kind of gone back on what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
So how could they get upset with Drake? Because they had kind of changed. They changed what they told him. And, so to their credit, now I remember Drake coming in my office, and it was literally right before COVID. It was probably, January, February, around that time, him coming in my office and saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to flip and go from Alabama, and I'm going to go to North Carolina." And I was like, I'm like, first off, I don't care. It's your life. You do what you want. I said, but you realize you told me to tell people for like a year that you weren't going to go there. now they're going to look at me like, what was I talking about? I said, but whatever, it's no big deal. I said, now look though, I'm not calling Coach Saban. I'll make phone calls for you, but I ain't calling Coach Saban and telling him that. So you have to make that phone call yourself.
That would be an interesting phone call to hear. Obviously, he had the family ties at Carolina, but his whole family has had athletic success. What role do you think that his family played in his development, in his decision making, and his pathway to the NFL?
Well, first off, how would you not like to be Mark May? The guy's had a son win a national championship in basketball, watch his son play in the Final Four. He got to watch his other son in Omaha at the College World Series. Now he gets to watch another son, in the Super Bowl. I'm like, man, what kind of deal with the devil does that guy have? Unbelievable. No, I'll say this: being in that family, I think being the youngest in that family has probably been a big part of his development. Can you imagine being the youngest in that family? You got Luke, you got Cole, and then, Bo's actually the tallest, biggest kid, in there. And, you know, here's the funny thing. Drake is the smallest kid in that family. That's what's amazing, is like he is the smallest kid in that family. So being the smallest and the youngest, I can't imagine how much he had to fight, fight for stuff when, he was growing up. And I bet it's made him probably a lot of the competitor that he is. I think what's so unique about that relationship though, and I've always been very admired Mark and Ame for how they instilled this in their kids. They compete like crazy with each other. I mean, they compete like crazy. I've been on the golf course with Luke and Drake, and Luke unfortunately had the bad luck of having me on his team when we played golf. So yeah, but I think the one thing is, though, as competitive as they are also each other's biggest fans. You watch, you would watch Luke's basketball games, and Drake is there. He's the cheering as loud as anybody in the stands, and Cole and Bo, and that night that we're playing Huff, all these, Bo's a Huff graduate, but there he is, cheering like crazy for his brother. And, so they're all each other's biggest fans. And I think that says a lot about them. But I think the competitiveness of that family, and again, being the youngest in that family, I think certainly played a big part in his development.
What part of his game do you think a casual football fan might underrate?
Did
I stump?
I would say his accuracy, but then he completed like 70% of his passes this year, so it'd be hard to say that. But say his, people don't realize how good of an athlete he is, but they've watched him scramble. I can't think of any skill set he has not shown. Here's the funny thing, and I said this to him a couple of weeks ago. There was a play in, maybe it was the Chargers playoff game, where they were throwing a pass. They threw a reverse pass, and he went out, and they threw it, and he completely botched it. Like he missed time to jump, and I'm like, you missed the opportunity to show off one of his best skills. The kid has unbelievable hands. He has tremendous hands. We had actually in the offseason going into 2020, with Owen, being pretty darn good and very athletic, we had worked on a red zone package with Owen at quarterback, with Drake lined up at receiver as an X receiver, where we would probably be throwing him fades in the end zone because his hands were just, ridiculous. It does remind me of a 7-on-7 play. You asked for a play that nobody ever saw it. So
I was good. 7-on-7
film on it. We were playing in a 7-on-7 tournament down in Rock Hill, and it was Drake's had just gotten there like a month ago, and Owen was going to be a freshman, but Owen was in there running the offense at the time, and we line up with a play. And we don't have an X receiver, which for us is the receiver, the farthest outside receiver. And we had a play called where that guy was supposed to run a go route. And we're like, who's the X? We don't have an X. We don't have an X. And Drake is standing right next to me. And he just runs on the field and lines up at X. And I don't know if Owen didn't pay attention to who was out there or thought, oh, what the hell? But Owen throws him a 40-yard ball down the sidelines, and Drake is covered and reaches over top of this kid, and with one hand snags it out of the air, and our entire bench unloaded onto they went absolutely crazy. It's one of the greatest catches I've ever seen, and it's not on film anywhere. But we got penalized too. They made us bow. I was like, I don't really care. I'll let the kids enjoy that moment. But
today that 7-on-7 would be on film. I
think
promise.
Today it would be on film and probably be all over YouTube and be everywhere. Exactly.
Uh,
But his hands, when you would watch him play basketball, he averaged, 15 rebounds a game both years. And one of the main reasons he was so great at rebounding was his hands. If he touched the ball, he was grabbing the rebound. I mean, he has tremendous hands.
Another interesting point that you see a lot of times with these high-level elite athletes, they did not just play the one sport in high school. Multi-sport guys. We'll end on this. Two quick ones. One, is Drake Maye your NFL MVP? And two, what's your prediction for Super Bowl Sunday?
Oh man, I will say yes because they don't. It was voted on before the playoffs. His playoff numbers have been, okay. I mean, in his
Some
defense,
tough conditions too, though.
He has played the number 1, the number 3, and the number 5 defense in the league in those 3 playoff games, and he's played in 2 snowstorms,
snow games,
in the last 2 weeks, so that has contributed a little bit. Obviously, you make the strong case for Matthew Stafford. The one thing I'll say in Drake's defense is that Matthew Stafford has probably the best receiver in the league in Puka Nacua, and also has Devontae Adams, who for most of his career has been a top 10 receiver in the league. Drake doesn't have a top 10 receiver. I mean, Stephon Diggs may have been years ago, but he does not have, the same weapons around him that Stafford has. I think it's going to be close. I think it'll be a close vote. You're asking me if I had a vote, I'm voting for him.
That's the easiest question I've asked all day. I think.
No question.
Yeah.
Wow. I haven't had enough chance to really, look at the Super Bowl and make a prediction. I'm not a big predictor guy anyway. That's why I don't bet, all the betting apps. I stay off of them because I value my money way too much, and I would lose money because I'm just not good at it. But I like the way New England's defense is playing right now. I think they have taken a complete multiple steps up here in the playoffs, and so I can, I don't see any reason why that will change. The prediction I'll give you is I think it's going to be a very, very close ball game, and I just like the way the Patriots are playing right now. If I was betting, I'd probably take that 4.5. I think that they're giving the Patriots. I'd probably take that. Here's a funny story. So in 2018, so Josh McCown was with us in the offseason before the 2018 season, right up to NFL training camp, and then he went back to the Jets and played with the Jets that year. But he, was still very involved. Obviously, Owen was on the team, so he was involved there. Paid a lot of attention, and this was before the NFHS network, so you couldn't watch the games, live on Friday night. But at 10 or 11 o'clock on Friday night, as soon as I got those games on Huddle, wherever they were in New York or wherever he was, he would pull it up and he would watch the games. And he would watch it with the other Jets quarterback, and they would sit there and watch the games. You know who that quarterback was?
I do not.
Sam Darnold.
Oh, wow. Really?
Sam Darnold.
Look at that connection.
So Sam Darnold was watching film of Drake Maye when he was in the 10th grade. He was watching his Myers Park game films with Josh McCown.
And what did Sam Darnold think about Drake Maye in high school?
I don't know. If somebody asked me that too, I'd have to ask Josh because it was 7 years ago, man. I don't remember exactly what Sam said about it, but
that's like, you have to imagine you got an NFL quarterback watching high school quarterback game film, and however many years later you're going to play each other in a Super Bowl. That's pretty crazy.
It is kind of crazy. Josh and I were texting about it last night. Josh was just like, Josh was like, what a crazy, crazy story. And, it's going to be tough for him because him and Sam obviously are close. He was his coach with the Vikings last year.
Yeah.
Josh was the Vikings quarterbacks coach and had Sam last year, so they're really close. So I'm sure this will be a tough one for him.
And of course, Sam Darnold spent time in Charlotte.
Yes, exactly.
Drake grew up a Panthers fan.
Yep.
Cam Newton fan. So lots of little interesting ties there.
Yeah.
And now Drake's going to do something that I didn't think was ever possible. He's going to get people in Charlotte and North Carolina to pull for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, how about that, man? No kidding. Jeez. They get a lot of people that probably would never have rooted for the Patriots.
Absolutely.
I'm one of them. No doubt about it. I haven't been able to, get a jersey or anything like that.
Oh man,
I'm just glad he didn't. I'm just glad he didn't go to the Cowboys. That would have probably known that I could have handled that. I don't know if I could have done that. I threw the remote on draft night when the Redskins didn't take him at number 2. I broke a remote that night, but at least it wasn't the Cowboys.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, Coach, we appreciate the time. Enjoy watching the Super Bowl, and we hope your prediction for MVP comes true.
We'll see. Thanks a lot, Nick. I always love talking with you.
Thank you, Coach.